I am Madhav Kapoor, and I'll be summarizing the chapter Greenspan's Bubbles from the book The Return of Depression Economics. You might not know who Alan Greenspan was, but he changed your life more than Michael Jordan, the iPod, and YouTube put together. Alan Greenspan was the chairman of the Federal Reserve for about 19 years. The position itself made him one of the most powerful financial officials in the entire world. And as he left his office in 2006, he was praised by many. He was called the greatest central banker in history, a monetary messiah. He was considered to be a legend, mostly because of good economic news with respect to inflation, the financial markets, and unemployment. During Greenspan's time in office, the US economy saw a low inflation rate. The unemployment was at unforeseeably low levels, and the stock market saw high returns. But after a few years of Greenspan leaving office, his name was mud. People realized that it wasn't his financial and economic intellect, but sheer luck that led to good economic news. He was just in the right place at the right time. The low inflation rate was because of Greenspan's predecessor, Paul Volcker, who undertook tight monetary policies to bring down inflation. Unemployment levels were low and the stock market was booming because American businesses learned how to use information technology, which boosted productivity and led to increased job creation and profitability. It had nothing to do with Greenspan's policies. Greenspan's name was further besmirched because of two bubbles, the dot-com bubble and the housing bubble. First, let's talk about the dot-com bubble, which burst around the year 2000. One very clear observation of the dot-com bubble is how inflated the stock prices were around the year 1999. Extreme optimism about the profit potential of information technology and a growing sense of security about the economy were the reasons for this bubble. How did this happen? During the 1990s, people saw others making high returns from the stock market, which tempted others in the United States to invest in stocks. This meant more and more people were pouring money into the market, which led to inflated stock prices. And after a point, stock prices were feeding off of themselves. This continued for a few years. But as we all know, there is a limit to everything. As soon as that limit was reached, around the year 2000, the stocks lost about 40% of their valuation on average. One of the most hilarious examples of how inflated the stock prices were could be the case of Pets.com. This was a website which turned an unsettled business model and a smart ad campaign into an astronomical valuation. After the bubble burst, however, the US economy was pushed into recession. As the recession started, Greenspan aggressively cut down interest rates and quickly turned the recession around on its head. On the surface, the recession lasted just 8 months. But by digging deeper into the situation, we see that the job market felt the brunt of the recession for the following 2 years. You can see in the graph that unemployment rose significantly from 2001 to 2003. Alan Greenspan managed to cut the recession short on the face of it. But what he did was he just replaced one recession with another. It was a housing bubble which burst in the September of 2008. This bubble burst sent shockwaves across the global economy and led to the most devastating recession of the 21st century. There were many reasons for this housing market crash, but the most important one was the low interest rate at the beginning of the decade, which was Greenspan's response to the previous bubble. This is why the book says that Greenspan just replaced one recession with another. Due to the low interest rate, people started borrowing more and more money and put it in one of the safest bets at that time, the housing market. This led to inflation in the housing market. Now, it is well known that many Americans had long been buying houses from borrowed money. But the problem this time was they didn't have money to repay this loan. These lending practices didn't help either. Lenders were providing loans to buyers with little or no down payment. This dubious lending went under the heading subprime. Now, why were lenders giving out bad loans? Mostly because they didn't care. They thought that when worse comes to worse, the borrowers would just sell off their homes and repay the loans. And they thought that there wasn't any risk because home prices were rising anyway. They didn't care about the quality of the loans either because weren't the ones who held onto them. They pooled a bunch of these mortgages together and sold them to amateur investors. This pooling of loans is called securitization and isn't a risky process if followed traditionally. In fact, securitization was a safe practice because it consisted of prime mortgages, which were made to borrowers who could make huge down payments and had enough income to cover interest payments. But in the 2000s, banks came up with a new investment product called a collateralized debt obligation or a CDO, which allowed the securitization of subprime mortgages. A CDO was made up of tranches, junior tranches and senior tranches. Senior tranches received first claim on payments from the mortgages, and once these payments were made, only then was money sent to the junior tranches. On paper, this made the senior tranches a safe investment, because even if some of the mortgages defaulted, it wasn't likely that there would be a lack of cash flow to the senior tranches. And because of this, Rating agencies like Moody's and Standard and Poor's classified the senior tranches as AAA. Because these were AAA rated, pension funds were ready to buy them. Some economists, however, did figure out that there was a problem and suggested that there was a bubble forming in the housing market. But Alan Greenspan declared that a bubble in the housing market was most unlikely. But there was a bubble that started deflating in the year 2006. And by then, Alan Greenspan had long left his office and was hailed as a financial mastermind. When the bubble burst, the Fed was barely able to pull the economy out of recession. And they were able to do so because they just replaced the housing bubble with the previous one. But the big question this time is that when this bubble bursts, will the Fed be able to pull America out of the recession? Thank you.